So this is part 2, beaches and sand dunes. Beach, well, what is that? Well, it's the accumulation of sand between the lowest spring tides and the highest spring tides. Beaches can be made out of sand, shingle, and or even pebbles. Beaches receive their material from longshore drift, constructive waves, cliff erosion, and river discharge. Beaches can be divided into backshore, offshore, and foreshore. Sounds like for sure. The backshore is the area above the normal high tide level. The foreshore is the area in between the normal high and low tide, and offshore is the area below the normal low tide. But you don't really need to know that. Intertidal zone, the area of land between high tide and low tide. Sand dunes. Well, they are very dynamic, which means that they're constantly changing. Sand dunes are found behind berms and are basically an extension of the beach. They are formed by dry sand being blown up on the beach. Yellow dunes are sea couch and marram grass begin to grow on the foredunes, so they become more stable as they grow. As the dune grows and the vegetation develops, a humus layer develops, which is called, the whole thing is called a yellow dune. What's a gray dune? Well, it's when there's a developing humus layer, and that layer starts changing the color of the dune from yellow to gray. Mature dunes, this is when the humus layers grow even more, and then the dunes can sustain more plants, flowers, and even trees. Then dune slack is, as the size of the dunes develop, water can collect between the dunes. Marsh plants can grow in these wet areas. Blowout. A blowout is a depression or hole in the dune caused by the wind. Humus is the layer of decaying plant and animal matter that adds nutrients to the ground. So, salt marshes. Salt marshes are usually found behind spits, in estuaries, or on low-energy coastlines. Because their areas tend to have low levels of energy, deposition exceeds erosion. The continued deposition means mud banks are formed and they are exposed at low tide. Salt and water-resistant grass is able to grow on these mud banks, forming salt marshes. The salt-resistant vegetation, which we call halophytic, means more sediment, so load is trapped, and water is restricted to channels rather than to the whole salt marsh. As the height of the salt marsh increases, more types of vegetation are able to colonize, so move in and grow. The area of land that is inundated, so covered, just inundated by the water, by seawater, only at high tides and sometimes only spring tides, is called the sward zone. Plants in the sward zone can only survive being under seawater for a maximum of 4 hours a day. Coastal defenses. Coasts are vulnerable locations that do need protecting. They need protecting because of the economic value they bring to areas like fishing, tourism, and transport. Coastal erosion is mainly caused by hydraulic pressure, corrosion, and wave pounding. However, subaerial erosion can also play an important role. You don't need to know about that. Areas that are near to sea level are made from soft rock, and the ones that are made from soft rock are particularly vulnerable. If coastal erosion is allowed to happen, coastal roads, ports, holiday resorts, farmland, and even whole villages may be lost. Hard engineering. This is building a physical structure, usually out of wood or concrete, to protect the coast. Hard engineering is usually more effective, but it can be very expensive and ugly to look at. Okay, so what are some coastal defense methods? Riprap. Riprap is basically giant boulders placed at the foot, so at the bottom of cliffs. They are designed to absorb the waves' energy and protect the cliffs behind. Riprap can be effective, but it does look ugly and may reduce access to the beach and can be expensive. So basically you put these giant boulders of rock here where the cliff starts. But it's ugly, but it works, and it's expensive too. Gabion, or Gabion, I don't even know. Just think of it like the country Gabon, but with an I in front of the O. That. Also uses large boulders, but this time the boulders are placed in cages. This means that the gabion can be installed quickly, and again is fairly effective. However, it also looks ugly, reduces access, and can be expensive. So very similar to riprap. Gabion, they're just large boulders, It works, very effective, it goes quick, but it's very ugly. It reduces access to go to the actual place. Plus, it's kind of ugly. I mean, it's expensive. Okay, groins, spelled with a Y, not an I, as one might think. So groins are designed to stop longshore drift transporting away beach material. They can be effective in maintaining a beach, but need replacing regularly. They look ugly and can cause problems down the coast because they are not receiving beach material. So, yeah, that's what a groin is for, to stop longshore drift transporting away the beach material. So stop basically the beach erosion, not really the cliff, but the coastal erosion. Seawall. Seawalls are made out of concrete and are aimed to absorb the waves' energy. Sometimes they are recurved to direct the wave energy back out to the sea. These can be very effective, but once again are expensive, ugly, and reduce access. Breakwaters are built out into the sea. They are coast's first line of defense. Instead of breaking on the coast, waves break on the breakwater. They are often found around the mouths of rivers and ports. They are expensive and can disrupt shipping and animals. So, these little breakwater thingies here. Revetments. They are similar to seawalls, but often built out of wood. They are often found at the foot of cliffs, and because they are designed to absorb the waves' energy. Again, they need replacing regularly and don't protect against big storms, so that's revetments. Soft engineering. Rather than building physical structures made out of wood and concrete, soft engineering is working with nature. The results of soft engineering look much more natural and may not even be noticed. The advantage with soft engineering is that it doesn't ruin the look of the coastline and it can be a lot cheaper. However, the main problem is that most forms of soft engineering cannot withstand strong storms. In fact, a hurricane can strip a recently replenished beach of all of its sand. So, dune stabilization. Dune stabilization is planting vegetation on the berm of the beach or on dunes. By planting vegetation, you should be making them more stable, the roots will make it stable, and also reducing the moisture content. So basically, if you plant stuff in dunes, because then the sand is less likely to be blown away or something. Cliff regrading. This means making the cliffs less steep. So think gradient, grading, gradient, regradient, regrading. Cliff regrading. This means making the cliffs less steep. Cliffs often become unstable because of undercutting. By reducing the angle, you should reduce the undercutting and the risk of the cliff collapsing. Because look at my mouse now, if the cliff is here, then the waves will erode down here and then it'll fall down. But if it's like this, then the waves can erode all of this, so nothing's going to happen until they reach here. So, it's a good thing. Beach nourishment. This is simply adding more sand to the beach. Beaches are natural defenses, so by making them bigger, you are creating a natural defense. Sand is sometimes taken from the seabed or dunes inland. So, coral reefs. A coral reef is a line of coral polyp found in warm, shallow seas. Polyp are tiny carnivorous, so meat-eating animals. Polyps live in groups called colonies. A polyp has a mouth at one end. The mouth is surrounded by a number of tentacles. These tentacles resemble feet, which is how they get their name, because polyp is a Greek word which means many feet. Yeah, polyps can't move from their limestone homes. They mostly feed at night. So a polyp reproduces by dividing its own body to form two polyps, or by producing sperm and eggs. Each polyp builds a case of limestone around itself, using calcium from the water. It is like a house, with a floor and walls. This remains after it has died and forms a foundation for other polyp to build a house on, putting a floor on the roof of the old one. When these limestone formations increase, they are called coral reefs. Coral reefs are very, very delicate and need the following conditions to form. Tropical sea conditions, so it must be between the two tropics. It can't be too hot, can't be too cold. Warm waters. It must be over 18 degrees all year, so it can't get too cold. It can't be colder than 18 degrees. It must always be above 18. It must be clear water, so no sediment, no pollution. It needs sunlight, and the water needs to be less than 60 meters deep. What is a fringing reef? Well, Fringing reefs circle or fringe the coastline or island. They are often protected by barrier reefs further out to the sea, so the plants and animals that live in fringing reefs are suited to low wave energy environments. So here on this picture you can see the fringing reef. They circle or fringe the coastline of islands. So here, that little gray stuff is the reef. Then you've got a barrier reef. These occur further from the sea and are commonly separated from the mainland or island by a deep lagoon. Barrier reefs are normally older and wider than fringing reefs. The Great Barrier Reef in eastern Australia is a barrier reef and stretches for 1,600 kilometers. So here you can see the barrier reef is, a lot further away. So now, the atoll. They rise from submerged volcanoes. They are similar to barrier reefs in terms of biodiversity and form. However, they are confined to submerged oceanic islands, unlike barrier islands, which can follow continental lines. So, yep. Benefits of coral reefs. What's good about them? Well, they support 25% of marine species, and they protect coastlines from erosion. They they act as a natural barrier against tropical storms and even tsunamis, since they can absorb energy. They act as natural recycling agents for carbon dioxide from the sea and the atmosphere. They contribute material to the formation of beaches in the form of eroded coral reef material. They are the source of raw material for things like jewelry and ornaments. Many species are being found to contain compounds useful in medicine. They benefit the tourism industry because many people like to dive and snorkel over coral reefs. They provide important fishing grounds, and the global value of coral reefs in terms of coastal protection, fishing, and tourism has been estimated at $375 billion. So, how are coral reefs damaged? Well, rising sea levels means that the depth of water above the coral reefs is increasing. This means that in the future, coral reefs will not receive enough sunlight to survive, because as we know, coral reefs can only occur at depths less than 60 meters in the sea. Okay, another way that they're damaged is when the global climate increases, and this means that many corals are being bleached. Coral reefs are extremely sensitive to changes in temperature and can bleach, as in die and turn white, even with only small increases. Hurricanes. Although coral reefs act as a natural defense against tropical storms, they can be severely damaged during those. Or these. I don't know. Fishing techniques like dynamite, cyanide, and trawling can damage corals. Corals are sensitive and take hundreds and thousands of years to grow. Damaging fishing techniques, therefore, can cause long-term damage, so just damaging fishing techniques can damage them. Deforestation. As areas of land are deforested, especially in the tropics, so Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, there is a greater surface runoff and more sediment enters the rivers and is ultimately discharged into the sea. The increased sediment reduces visibility and means less sunlight reaches the coral. Overfishing. Not only do damaging fishing techniques damage the coral, but overfishing does too. Coral reefs have delicate food webs, and if you remove elements of the food web, it can upset the balance of the reefs. Pollution. The growth of urban settlement and tourist development, as well as increased coastal traffic, can also cause pollution to the reefs. Tourism. Tourism can damage reefs in many ways. Anchors from tourist boats can damage them. Motorboat engines can kill animals, like from tenders and stuff. Divers can touch and damage coral, and tourist development can release pollution. Marine trade. There are many products like coral, turtle shells, starfish, and seashells that get removed from corals and sold in jewelry or something, or even just for tourists. This removal of coral and animals damages the reefs. So how can you manage coral reefs? Well, damaging fishing practices like dynamiting can be banned. It is important that this is enforced or the practices will carry on. There can be conservation zones where tourists aren't allowed, or where there is a restriction of numbers, like there's only a certain number of people who are allowed to go at a time. Areas where coral reefs can't be farmed or What? Areas where coral reef cannot be farmed can be created. Just ignore that one. I don't really understand what that's even supposed to do in this PowerPoint. Fish stocks can be enhanced and quotas imposed on amount being caught. So you have a quota so to reduce overfishing. Sewage outlets can be moved downstream of coral reefs, and you can ban the dropping of anchors on coral reefs. You can reduce the use of fertilizers near those coral reefs. And finally, one of the most important is educating people about why coral reefs are important and how we can protect them.